Hey guys, welcome to Nar Makes. This week I had a couple different goals. First and foremost, it was to create some awesome looking terrain and show you how fun and easy it is to build. I was heavily inspired by the 40k model kits, Alchemite Stack and Ferritonic Furnace, so those are the main themes I'll be focusing on today. The pieces by Games Workshop are fantastic sculpts, and I can't hope to match them in detail. My goal is simply to use them as inspiration for the build, and recreate them in spirit rather than exactly matching them. Another goal I had was to use some new materials. I've been looking for an opportunity to use more EVA foam in a build, and the curved surfaces required to get the effects I wanted seemed like the perfect opportunity. I didn't have as many free evenings this week as usual, so I had to really speed up my usual process, skipping some texturing and weathering that I would normally do. And lastly, I wanted to incorporate some LEDs into the build, so my idea was to have the furnace light up with this tea light to show it glowing. Let's dive into how it all came together. Start by defining my overall structure. For this large cylinder, I take an old light fixture casing. I'm starting to run out of these soon. I'm trying to find a way to make a dome structure to go on top, so I'm using this round plastic ball that you can probably steal from your child's room. Managed to achieve the desired shape. Next, we're using some EVA foam here. This stuff is awesome. You can bend it into any shape and stretch it to fit any gaps. You barely need to measure it. Takes hot glue pretty well, just be mindful of the strings that come off. I mentioned I didn't spend too much time on this, so all the structures I'm making here were done in 3 to 4 hours one evening. Without a real plan, I just layered scraps of EVA foam on top of each other to create the kind of machinery that's gotten repairs over time, and it's been patched up and repaired and re-repaired. Other than EVA foam, as you can see, I also used some chipboard where I didn't need as much bend, and other scraps of foam core board I had lying around in the garbage bin. For the taller exhaust stack, I'm using the core of an aluminum foil roll. This idea came from Eric's Hobby Shop channel. Since watching his videos, I've been keeping an eye on our kitchen drawer for when the roll gets low. For the details, the plastic bits come from a soap dispenser. I glue these on top and to the side. They pretty much look like pieces from a model kit. Oh yeah, we're gonna add some magnets here. This is the perfect application. I have these bigger fridge magnets that would be perfect here. Just need to make sure we don't mess up the polarity and just hot glue them on. The hole in the soap dispenser nozzle happened to be the exact same diameter needed for the magnet, so that worked out well. Quick test to see if it works. Perfect. To add some more detail, I took some blank sprues and cut the large segments out. These are going to go on the side of the structures. I also added some wires of various sizes, which look fantastic. Note to self, add more wires in the future. Also acquire more sprues. EVA foam takes sculpting details very well. You can indent parts of it to form rivets with a round pointy object. My 3D printer's been out of commission, but my father offered to fix it and he lent me his in the meantime. Thanks, Dad. I printed these sci-fi consoles, vents, and other random bits to stick on the side. They go the extra mile in adding a lot of detail. I think I searched for the term sci-fi greeble on Thingiverse, and I downloaded a bunch of files that looked right and just stuck them on the build plate. To build the furnace, I sketch out the position of the tea light on this long piece of MDF, and I cut the edges off so that it fits flush with the base when glued in. Tin snips can cut through MDF like it's paper, but it's a bit more destructive. It kind of crushes the paper. This part is being covered by the furnace tank, so it's not a big deal. Going on top is the cardboard from a tape roll and a plastic lid jammed into it to form a sort of cauldron. I pre-drilled a hole going into it for the tea light LED to poke through. For the conduit, I'll do my best to line up these burnt out halogen bulbs and this heatsink. I'm hot gluing a piece of scrap metal to form a support for the heatsink and then switching to super glue for the rest. Hopefully it holds. That little spray bottle is a CA activator. Make sure you don't spray it on top of your super glue container, or you're gonna have a bad time. This is the secret to getting your CA glue curing very quickly, and one bottle lasts forever. I've had this bottle for a couple years now, and it still has a bit to go. You don't need a whole lot. I didn't want one end of it sticking out in the air, so I added a piece of tile transition strip. It has a vaguely industrial look at this scale, and it was right beside me, so I just grabbed it. Using the same approach as with the bigger tank, I layered on pieces of EVA foam to get the details I wanted, and then came in with some random bits and bobs. 3D printed details and such. Let's see if we can name them all. That was a pizza box middle holder thingy, a bit of sprue, a safety plug from an epoxy syringe, baby food cap, a part of an IKEA kitchen counter assembly, a wire connector cap, bubble tea drinking straw, 3D printer nozzle thingy, second 3D printer nozzle thingy, and finally a threaded nut. Wow, that was a lot of words. Let's take a moment to thank our sponsor. Just kidding. We're going to use part of this Kinder Bueno box to add even more detail to the structures. I'm simply cutting some thin strips that are just going to go around and add an ever so slightly little bit more detail. To build some quick raised walkways, we're going to start with some I-beams made from chipboard. These pillars were left over from one of my last builds, linked in the card above. Figured I would use them here. With the I-beams on top of the concrete pillars, we simply place some chipboard and add some gravel filters to form the walkways. Using the leftover aluminum core tube, I made a connector pipe, attaching a bottle cap and a light bulb socket to each end and magnetizing it. I used EVA foam once again to detail some of the raised edges and masking tape to hide the cardboard lines. I then base coated everything with a layer of Mod Podge and black paint, and I wanted to add a nicer transition for this structure in case I did not have the exhaust on top. So I opted for some mesh tape so that it can be used as a small platform if needed. After giving the PVA glue a chance to dry, came in with some scissors and trimmed off the excess. Oh, what's that? I got a note from earlier in this video to use more wires. Alright then, let's use more wires. Cutting up an Ethernet cable gives me various widths of small gauge wire I can use to really add a ton of detail to the structure. As I was doing this, I ended up adding more panels with EVA, just layering a bit more detail on. If you look at some of the kits, you can see that the wires tend to go from underneath panels to underneath other panels. So it just made a lot of sense to have wires going in those crevices where I didn't have crevices before. For some of the wires, I just picked a high point and a lower point and I just hooped them in through the air so that they would kind of look like they were freestanding. You can also make little bundles of wires and hot glue them on parchment paper and then apply them as one solid piece, and it becomes a bit easier. For the walkway, I chose to keep it pretty simple and just looped one wire across, and then I cut off a little bit of a different wire and made it hang down to where it was kind of broken off. For the furnace, I wanted to mimic the effect of really hot molten metal, so I started with a dark shade of red and I base coated the interior of the furnace. Painting the exteriors was a lot of fun. I decided to go with a bold color scheme of blue and bronze, so I'm just base coating everything in blue for now. For the parts we're going to highlight in bronze, we're going to start with a brown undercoat, and we're going to work our way up to that bronze afterwards. Trying to make a smooth gradient from yellow to red, with the hottest part being yellow and white at the bottom of the pool and coming up to red near the rim. I laid out my yellow, orange, and red paints in front of me so I can mix them together to form all the midtones, and I'm wet blending them together as I go. While parts of the furnace dry, I go back and redo some of the base coat in blue just to cover up any patchy areas. Here's where I try something new and scary. I'm going to attempt to make a molten pool of metal with 5-minute epoxy. By adding a pinch of white and yellow paint into the mix, I'm hoping to slightly tint the epoxy and give me the look I'm looking for. In retrospect, I should have left it uncolored, since it would have allowed more light to shine through. Well, you live and learn. As you can see here, I'm mixing it up and it ends up looking a lot like mustard. Or maybe cheese dip. Now, the packaging does not lie. This actually sets in 5 minutes. And yeah, there are some bubbles, which I did try and get rid of with a blow dryer. And that wasn't really the main issue. It was the opacity. To salvage it a bit, I decided to go in a different direction. I added crackle paste. This is basically acrylic paint that dries and shrinks really fast, forming these cracks. But yeah, look at this. I'll turn off the lights and turn on the tea light, and you can barely see it, but oh well. I continue to dry brush lighter tints of blue onto each structure to get a contrast. I do 2 to 3 coats, going progressively lighter on each one. Next, I come in with a dark wash to bring all the details into the darker areas. This is a mixture of black ink, water, and a bit of dish soap to act as a flow aid. I'm gonna redo the gradient that I did before. This time I have some crackled pieces to give some variation at the bottom. Same concept, I'm gonna layer out various shades of yellow going up to red to indicate cooler areas. If you've never tried this type of technique, it's a lot easier than it looks. You should give it a try. I also take some care to highlight some of the details on the inside of the furnace with a bit of orange highlighting. I'm probably not doing the technique too much justice, but having a really watered down brush helps blend all the harsh transitions when laying down another layer. I think this part took me the most out of all the structures, but I think it was worth it in the end. Another round of weathering is done with a sponge. I dab on bits of orange paint all over the model in random patterns. This hints at rust and such. It's going to be toned down with a black wash once more. On to metallic paints, I used a silver and bronze to give some different looks. The smaller details are painted in silver and the larger surfaces in bronze. Off camera, I also added in some letters in white paint on various parts of the structure to give the flat areas some extra detail. Since all the pieces are distinct and stackable, it allows for a lot of different combinations when setting up the board. Let's have a look at some other videos I've done on the channel. See you around.